So I first met Alan Carlson as we were reopening special collections after the renovation in 2012, and Alan was, well, frankly, he kept pestering me because he wanted to know the date that we were reopening, because he was writing an article for Route 66 magazine, and I was at the point where it's like, I'll let you know as soon as I do, because it was one of those shifting city timelines that was, you know, makes life as a public servant so much fun. You blow one fuse and you back things up a couple weeks. So that was actually a great introduction, because Alan's passion for detail and interest in the topic led him to write a really nice article about the new building, the renovated building, and the place on Route 66 that it has held for so many years. And so as we were working to see, you know, what unexplored businesses, histories, pieces of the city can we have for making change, when Diane told me that Alan was going to do a piece on Albuquerque's racetracks, that's really exciting. Because for me, the racetrack history is something you see in aerial photographs and nowhere else. And so I'm just delighted that he has pulled this together for us, and I am gonna dim the lights and get out of the way.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Welcome to early Albuquerque auto racing. I see some people that I know who have been at dirt tracks, and there's probably some people who have never been at dirt tracks. So I'm going to talk about 3 post-World War II tracks here, and also some very early tracks. I want to thank Eddie Corbin for sharing his incredible racing scrapbook with us, and Diane Scheller for, she gets the thank yous up there. Diane Scheller for research and putting this PowerPoint together. Let's see, we've got a lot of people up there to thank. Carlos Garcia from Garcia Auto Group. A lot of people put some information into this, and my fellow auto racing historian, Joe Sherwood, he got me into this. Dirt track races were cheap. I mean, you just clear the rocks and vegetation away, and you can grade a track. A lot of farmers did it for racing horses, and then later raced cars on it. You see there, 1907, auto races on the Mesa track. Albuquerque was mostly Mesa then, so we have no clue where that was. The territorial auto races could have been at the territorial fairgrounds. And then in 1912, our mayor at the time, Colonel K.B. Sellers, was also president of the New Mexico Fair Association. He created a 20-mile course from east of the university to the foothills. And he had local drivers, they called them automobilists instead of motorists back then. But he said, go ahead and drive on it so it'll be ready for the track when we have the races during the state fair. One guy reported that he went 30 miles an hour and faster the entire length without shifting out of high. So, no speed demon. Later we had a track at, it was called Traction Park. It was down at the old Territorial Fairgrounds. It was built by the Albuquerque Traction Company that ran the electric trolley. They had races there. 1918 we had one with DKB Sellers and our future Mayor Clyde Tingley were on the race committee. We've been unable to find, is this working?
Oh, yeah.
It is when you talk down to it, but then when you go like that.
Yeah. We've been working on finding some more photos. If anybody knows any photos or information from these post-World War II tracks, well, please tell us. They had one on this 1917, they said a track on the Mesa, so there may still have been a track on the Mesa, but there was actually a Motor Speedway Association. They actually had a racing association 100 years ago. The big thing was 1925. The Albuquerque Auto Racing Association was planning New Year's races at the new track on the East Mesa. It's 2.5 miles east of the city and a half mile south of Central. See how there's a half mile right there, Susan. Two familiar names from Albuquerque history were involved in that. H.L. Gallus was listed as a referee, and Roy Stab as the umpire. I'd never heard those terms with auto racing before. I don't know where they got those. Roscoe Bangs was a promoter, and he claimed it was the first regulation auto race course in the state. So 1 1/8 mile banked oval, banked meaning it was higher on the outside of the track than the inside. The cars go faster. Wide turns. The racing headquarters at that time was the Franciscan Hotel. There's a advertisement for it, boost for Albuquerque. And here's a $1,500 purse. Wow, that's
$25.
kind of like the cars that would be running back then, the big old cars like that. Now the organizers were concerned because, like the other track, they invited local motorists to drive around it, and the people with those big old top-heavy sedans would tip over and were going too fast. They held the race. One driver was thrown out of his car and knocked unconscious, and one driver lost the wheel and went out into the parking lot and destroyed a guy's Model T sedan. And he sued them for $300, so probably the cost of the vehicle. Now, in April of 26, a new 1 mile track was supposedly being built on the Van Cleve Ranch into Harris Canyon by the Albuquerque Amusement Company for a Memorial Day race, but something must have happened with that track because they ended up having it at the fairgrounds. They said it was the first event at the new $50,000 fairgrounds. I'm not sure what was happening there because there were no state fair activities there at the time. Now, the Depression era in 29 to 40 put a damper on racing, but in 28, right before that, a group of Albuquerque businessmen headed by Arthur Prager, who owned the Albuquerque Gas and Electric Company, built this Pueblo-style set as a backdrop for Native American pageants, rodeos, things like that. It was 4-story structure. It was strong enough for people to stand on and sit on, but apparently most of it was paper mache. And this was actually the site of the 1926 track, because if you stand on in front of the north end of A Air Base Storage on Wyoming Southeast, you'll see that exact view of the mountain right there. Here's an ad for the auto races. It was called on the first American grounds. They didn't really have a name for the auto racing. It was the racetrack, I guess. They had auto races and motorcycle races. And can you imagine cars like that racing? Unfortunately, they had a death there in 1930. James Hall was thrown out of his machine and killed. So that was the first fatality we have noted for auto racing in Albuquerque. In the mid-30s, they built a midget track in that same place. When that racing became popular, and there was a bad crash there in 38 that almost killed a guy. Then we go to this place called Hell's Half Acre. Joe Sherwood kept saying, "What about Hell's Half Acre?" Well, I didn't know, so we finally found some articles about it. It was described, this says 2, but others say 2.5 miles northeast of the Triangle of Monte Vista. It was a U-shaped track with hills and dips and sharp left and right turns. The promoter was Johnny Lee, not the singer, but he built one here, and they practiced at the old midget track at First American. Opening day was Memorial Day, and Jerry Youngster Sr., first time we heard the Youngster name raced. They abandoned that track after about 3 events because it was just too rough. It was tearing up cars and people were getting hurt, and spectators couldn't see the whole track. So then you go back to the first American grounds, and they call it Navajo Speedway. And Jerry Munzer raced there. He was the president of the Albuquerque Drivers Association then, and he actually won the opening day race there. They closed that in August. The next thing you know, there's a place called Coronado Gardens. And this was a half-mile track at the old West Mesa Airport. This is a 63 view, so we don't really see the half-mile track that was there. That's a later course. It was a micro-midget track in the mid-late 50s for a time. And I don't know, it must have been a go-kart track then. And like we were talking about, they built horse race tracks all over. That's a horse racing track that a guy further up Central there had a salvage yard built to race his horses on.
So that's Central in the middle there?
That's Central, right? Mm-hmm.
And Coors going on.
That's Central and Coors, and that's where the old West Mesa Airport was. They had a dance club in the hangar, Coronado Gardens. They had time trials there on September 5th and stunt drivers, and 2 stunt drivers crashed head-on into each other and got hurt. They raced there in October and November, and that's the last we heard of that one. So we go back to the first American in 1940. And they said a new 1 1/8 mile track. I don't know why they had to build a new track there, but there was a midget track inside also. Now called First American Speedway. It opened Memorial Day and included a special ladies race. 4 had signed up and only 2 actually raced. And unfortunately we had more fatalities. June the 10th, driver went out of control and killed 3 spectators. They didn't have much safety back then, and they were standing where they should have been. The driver, E.O. Clark, said that he was blinded by the dust from the car in front of him. So that was a tragic thing for the end of the pre-World War II racing. The racing was suspended during the war. Not only to conserve materials, but most of these guys that would be out there racing were going to be soldiers. And it resumed later in 45. So the summer of 46, we have Carmen Speedway. This was a half-mile south of Central, just east of Wyoming, near the entrance to Kirtland Air Force Base. It was leased from a farmer. Well, he lived back over here near Zuni, and Eddie said that his dad said they used to run his horses on it. The farmer did, and I think that the farmer might have been running on that old First American track, because there it is.
And Alan, that dark band at the bottom, is that a road?
That's Wyoming. Mm-hmm.
What is it? Wyoming.
Yeah, that's Wyoming. Is that up there was where the First American was. The man, I think, might have been Edgar C. Hill. That's a man that lived in the area that was listed as a farmer, so that was possibly him. It was built by these 3 men, Dick Mitchell, Ray Craig, and Clark Corbin. Mitchell was Corbin's brother-in-law, and Ray Craig was a local contractor. Corbin had come from Wichita, Kansas with his wife Letha and their son Eddie here. He worked for Beach Aircraft and raced powerboats, and he was familiar with all the midget racing going on in that area. Dick Mitchell raced stock cars up there, and Ray Craig liked trotting horses. So all 3 men loved racing and decided to build a track. I don't think they were in it for money. You really couldn't be back then. It was just a sport. Now they call it Corbin, based on the first 3 letters of Corbin's and Mitchell's last names. There's Eddie and Lathan and Dale. It was a 1/5 mile dirt oval, basically flat, enclosed by a board wall. There's the grandstands. They faced east towards the mountains and seated 3,200 spectators. They had, not good for nowadays, but they have very limited protection to the spectators. Just a barred fence and some chain link. There's the concession stand back there and the ticket booth. That was on the west side of the facility. There's a pit gate between the pits and the stands. And here's the pit area, which was to the south of the area, south of the facility. Where they got the cars ready and fixed them. Now, Carmen was built for midget auto racing. And midget auto racing began in Los Angeles, California, August 10th at the Loyola High School Stadium. They originally raced on board tracks used for bicycle racing. They could be taken apart and assembled elsewhere, like our state fair rides. They also used abandoned dog tracks and fairgrounds. The first governing body was the Midget Auto Racing Association, and later the AAA, American Automobile Sanctioned Races, became popular in the United States and later in Australia and New Zealand, only they called them speed cars instead of midgets. That was 36, 37. Purpose-built tracks began to show up around the country. This is the biggest one in 1934, Gilmore Stadium. It was a multi-use facility built by Gilmore Petroleum, and it held 18,000 people. Many famous drivers raced here until it closed in 1950. It was torn down to build CBS's Television City. Well, we're going to attempt to show you a little auto racing here. Come on. This is the Big Wheel, 1949. Nighttime. That gets your blood pumping. Okay, let's look at some of these earlier midget race cars. They were open wheels, 12-inch wheels, 72-inch wheelbase. Most of them are rear-wheel drive. There were some successful ones that are front-wheel drive. A lot of them had like Model T frames and straight front axles. Homemade bodies. Some of them were made to resemble the Indy cars at the time, but some, this looks like the front end of a tractor here.
It was homemade.
They weighed like 700 to 900 pounds. Now, Earl Gilmore from Gilmore Stadium got tired of these clunky cars breaking down on this track because they were running motorcycle engines and outboard boat motors in them. So he went to Fred Offenhauser, a famous engine builder, and said, "Can you build a good engine for midgets that's durable and fast?" So he built a good one. It's a 4-cylinder aluminum engine, and it became the standard for the midget auto racing back then. That was the most popular engine. The only thing it could keep up with it was a Ford flathead DH60. The 60 was the horsepower. This was put in the Ford production cars, 37 to 40. It was less expensive than the Offenhauser, and you could buy a lot of bolt-on racing equipment. lasted a good time. There's a bit of rivalry between the Offies and the Fords and the midget racing. Provided for some great racing. Now, these cars didn't have a transmission. They had an in-out box. You put the thing in here and you push it off. And if it slips out in here, when you're racing, there's no clutch to put it back in. You just hope the guy behind you doesn't run over you. Well, this hot rod truck here was Bob Seth. He brought that from California where he raced it, and he came back to Albuquerque where he lived and was pushing midgets with it. Safety equipment, there was none. They had a seat belt, a lot of them, most of them, but look, there's no roll bar, there's no roll cage, there's no safety harness or anything. And Eddie Carmichael here from Oklahoma seems to be wearing a leather football helmet. This is the brake lever, and brake outside to see him with two hands. That must have been difficult to do, I don't know. Here's what a better helmet looked like. It was pretty much like a construction hat with a strap to hold it on. Now, in 1947, a company called Curtis Craft in California began building midget cars, the full cars and the kits, and they were the standard for midget racing back then. You could exchange parts, instead of hand mill something and you don't have parts for it. Well, everybody that raced these had parts and you could borrow them or whatever. This car, I believe, was a replica of it, is on display at the Hudson Racing Museum still. I'm not sure. Solar Aircraft also built midget race cars, and Popular Mechanics gave me plans on how to build one. So Carmen opens January 26, 1947. It had actually been built in 46, and they tried to blow up with the stock cars, but then this was their basic opening here in 47. Kind of expensive, $1.25 and then $1.75 box seats. A little expensive for the time. But Carmen filled the void. They had the midget racing circuit. And so the people that were coming through from California, and they had Texas, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Oklahoma, and Kansas. So it was a little midpoint stop for them. Carbon hired his friend from Wichita and former driver Frank Dickerson to be his track manager and the announcer. That's an up picture.
That's a hell of an exhaust.
Here's opening day. You had a capacity crowd. The weather was nice. There's Eddie. His mom and dad sitting out into the stands to hand out the first programs, and he was going, "Flee, flee," and people thought he meant 3 cents, and he came back with his pockets full of change. That's his aunt. People were bused to and from the Carmen with the Fairgrounds bus. It's a big crowd. Cars lining up, they had 10 cars and 7 events that first day, and they only had one driver from Albuquerque, Harold Jaggers, and he crashed out. Don Brown from Wichita won the first trophy dash there. He was also the 48 and 49 Kansas midget champion. Looks like he hasn't even finished his car. There's no interior in it. I don't know what that's about. Then we have disaster. We have a death on the first day of racing out there. Milton Millett, the 24-year-old guy from Mesa, Arizona, was killed in the feature. He ran up over the wheels of another car, got sideways, and 2 other cars hit him and turned him upside down, and he landed upside down. And as you see, their head sticks way above the rest of the car, so that's not good. And they kept racing. This was the main event. They finished the main event. Corky Benson from Los Angeles won the first heat, the semi-main, and the feature. That's Ray Craig with the Trophy Queen. There's a box seat from the second weekend. They only had 5 cars that weekend. I don't know if it is because of the accident or just people didn't have their cars ready. But Eddie Carmichael, the guy with the football helmet in the B60, beat Ernie Booth in the Offenhauser. So that was a good race. They're both from Oklahoma. Third week, they had this guy, Lloyd Ruby, 19 years old, from Wichita Falls, Texas. He's driving a famous car, the Wilson number 5. Drivers do not own their cars. They would go places and their owners would say, "Here, you're going to drive my car," and they didn't always drive the same cars either. So this was a famous car. Chet Wilson is a big piece of American racing history. So Lloyd Ruby raced the United States Auto Club Champ Series 58 to 77. He had 18 starts at Indy. There's a book about him called Lloyd Ruby, the greatest driver never to win the Indy 500. Here he is racing at our little track in Albuquerque, Bobby and Al Unser attended the dedication of an overpass in his honor in Wichita Falls in 2006. So the journal loved this. I mean, they got right on this, and they had detailed accounts and photos of the action and results and records broken. Every race was timed, and somebody was always completing that race faster, so they were always reporting on that, telling who would be at the next race. So that was great publicity. I mean, you could not ignore that auto racing was going on in Albuquerque. Here's still action. Marvin Clare from Oklahoma crashing through the fence. It beats hitting a concrete wall.
Yes.
Some racing action coming out of the second turn. 3 big drivers at a time: Ernie Booth from Oklahoma, Cotton Music from Kansas, and Lloyd Ruby from Texas. These boys driving a different car there. And they're getting muddy. They had this, some motorized bicycles they ran around the track at one time. An exhibition. That looks weird. Half motors, half scooter, half bicycle.
I love their helmets. Hey man, race is a race.
They have donkey races, yep. I don't think they're racing more than trying to stay on. That's like Ruby and Cotton Music. I don't know. Flag was there. So they had a short season, just kind of to get the track going, like 2 months. Ended in March of 47, and Cotton Music won the first championship. And he also won the 47 Kansas championship later that year. Now you see, they all got advertisement on them, so this was a good opportunity for businesses. They could advertise in the program and they could sponsor a car. And he says that some guys had 2 and 3 hoods with different sponsors on them. They would run them at night. Oh, let's see, we got to show you a steer. In between the races, between their seasons, they had steer roping. 12 Mexican longhorn steer. I wonder, Eddie, did your dad clean that up, or? So the management was happy that they were drawing all these big name people down, but Corbin wanted local drivers to participate, so he began a school at Corbin and had some guys come out there pretty well. This is Don Gordon driving his car, and he had another star student, Bill Hall. Corbin and all these other guys at the track, and some local people owned the cars, but they didn't have drivers for them. So and are happy to try. A lot of these guys were GIs from the States.
Do you have a list of all the drivers in these things?
Quite a few, yeah, pretty much. The Corvette second season started in June of '47. Bill Phillips and the RX Wranglers performed. They switched to night racing on the third weekend as they had installed lights. This is Bill Graham from Berlin and Bill Canfield from Albuquerque. There's Cormac's winner there. Clark Corbin trained this guy, Don Gordon. He won the mid-season championship in Corbin's car. And there's Wayne Alley from Albuquerque. He started to win main events. It's nice that in Eddie's book we have the newspaper articles to go along with the pictures. That's so cool. And here's a new young fella that just started racing. We all know for many years, but they called him Bud Taylor back then, but we knew him as Buddy. That's him in the pits at Carmen in his half pint.
What was in front of the radiator?
What's that?
What was in front of the radiator?
Oh,
Keep the rocks from.
yeah, they have push bars to, they say bump into each other. And they got those in the front, and they got the push bar in the back for pushing off.
Just put screen in front of it, to keep the mud out of it.
Yeah, keep the mud out of the radiator.
Very neat little trail. Another out-of-towner that came was Bill Cheeseburg from Tucson. Cheeseburg raced Indy. I think he got hurt at Indy, and he later won many Southwest Late Model Championships. I don't know if he did it with a midget, but in the modified late models, he was known to use his bumper to help him win. And we have Western night at the All-American Thrill Drivers one time, and then we had a Western night one night. You see that the lady in the trophy queen in Western attire, horses back there. This is Judd Larson. He happened to win that night. Judd was in the USAC Champ Car Series. He had 2 Indy starts in '58 and '59. Unfortunately, he was killed in '66 along with another driver in Reading, Pennsylvania. Now there's our champion for that year. Clark Corbin's student Bill Hall won that season. In fact, the top 4 that season were all from Albuquerque, so they were making progress here. There's opening for the next season, box seats. That opened October 19th for that season. They went back to daytime racing. A little dust, anybody? There's Duke Reed. He was the announcer that year. He's from KLB Radio. I love this parade lap with the cars and the flag and the mountains. That's great. That's 1947.
It almost looks like there's snow.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, here's snow. This is what happens to a dirt track when it gets really wet and everybody gets full of mud, especially this guy. Ed Ellie was in the wrong place at the wrong time there, and he got just coated with mud.
When did they start wetting down
Oh,
the
look
tracks?
at that.
Oh, they were wetting the tracks at this time. They had a water truck. I'll tell you about that later. Would you like to work on that in the pits? The opposite of the wet track is the dry track, and they did have a water truck, and one day it was coming up to the track, Ray Craig was driving it, and it overturned at Central Broadway, so they raced on a very dry track that day. They had promotions like bands at intermission, they had Kids Day, hear kids on their soapbox cars and pushed by other kids, and the winner got a trophy just like the big boys. Children under 12 free. They dropped the price down to $1 at that time because there was some mandate from the president or something that people cut prices. They had a motorcycle exhibition, Cattle Growers Day, Santa Fe night, Kiwanis Club fundraisers, model airplane exhibition. Then they had a 50-lap Easter feature where kids could win free bunnies. I think their parents were happy with that. This is Buddy Shea from Colorado, won a race, and this car won a championship at Gilmore Speedway. Very nice car. Bob Powell from Albuquerque, winning. There's Ed Alley minus the mud. Driver named Tommy Grisdale. And a Curtis Craft V860. Beautiful car. And more about Tommy. Buddy Taylor won the championship that year. Won the race of the year, September 48. His car was a half pint. It was originally owned by Tommy Grisdale, but later bought by a guy named Roy Rogers, not the cowboy. He also won the Arizona midget title in 53 and 54, and many others after that. Now they went back to daytime racing at Corbett, October 3rd, and guess what happened? Another driver was killed. First race they opened, and the last race to the second season, the driver was killed. This was Dale Smith of Albuquerque. Dale and his brother operated an insulation company out on North 4th Street, I believe. He was actually a one-arm driver. He lost part of an arm in a shooting accident, so they had a few of those driving. I don't know how with the steering wheel and the brake.
Oh, Alan, the address on that car talks about a wrecking yard at 120 Rio Grande. That would be right.
That's, I'm getting there.
Oh, that's
Toby Garcia's yard.
it's at 120.
They're taking what's left of poor Dale out of his car. Nobody has any emergency equipment or medical stuff on them. They're just, there's a stretcher and that's it. There's the exter ambulance, which was also a hearse. There's Buddy Taylor watching on, his friend there. And, unfortunately, 30 years later, Buddy would suffer a similar fate at Manzanita at Speedway. The irony of Dale Smith being killed is that he'd been elected president of the Rio Grande Sports Bowl, an organization opening a new track the following weekend. And that was Rio Grande Sports Bowl. It was built by Toby Garcia, who sponsored his car on Rio Grande, about the 1100 block in North Rio Grande.
Where the freeway is.
The grandstands faced mostly north and a little bit west. Held about 3,000 people, they said. And they had a little better protection for their fans. They raised the spectator area up, so they had a little bit more. Grand opening of Rio Grande Sports Bowl, October 17, 1948.
How fast do these cars go?
Oh, what, 60, 65 maybe?
Yeah, he said about 60.
Yeah.
60 to 65.
Not 60. They, you know, it's a 1/5 mile. You could get up a lot of speed. Tommy Grisdale took over as the president of Rio Grande Sports Bowl after Dale Smith died. And here's a corner at Rio Grande. It shows there's a salvage yard. And there's actually a residential area over there. There's a parade lap and something new, advertising on the walls. So that was another advertising opportunity for people.
Real close.
Real
24.
close.
Next door.
Charlie's Bar, that was part of the Garcia's thing. I'm glad they painted those poles white so you knew when you were gonna run into one.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's easy to tell the Carmen's pictures from the Rio Grande because the Carmen will have the mountains and this will have trees.
And telephone poles.
Was this also a night track?
What's that?
Was it also a night track?
That's fun. Yeah. They race at night.
Oh, I think they did at night, see there yet. Let's see. I think I've slipped that one. Clark Harvin got his start driver Bill Hall down there to race at Rio Grande. Other Albuquerque driver, Don Hartshorn. Jimmy Reese from Oklahoma raced here at least 2 times. Jimmy Reese ran Indy 6 times. Unfortunately, he was killed at age 28 of the race in 1958. Rio Grande ended their season December 5th, and Tommy Drisdale was a champ. But Drisdale was teaching guys to drive just like Corbin had been. He had Okie Cahill and Bobo Hannon. They were 2 of his popular drivers. He also helped Buddy Taylor, since he originally owned the car that Buddy drove. And he was friends with Bobby Youngster. Now, while they were racing midgets, they snuck in the first stock car racing in Albuquerque. That was kind of weird because I don't know where that picture is from. It's already racing, but it said in the paper that A. Ray Barker, the Jeep dealer, entered the Jeep even, so I don't know if their regulations weren't that great. So, we have two tracks now, and Rio Grande's racing in midget. Tommy Drisdale resigned as president of the Rio Grande Sports Bowl in May because he had something else going on. Here's Corbin with the Southwest Stock Car Racing Association, and guess who's president of that? Tommy Drisdale. The midget drivers would race Friday nights at Rio Grande and come up there Sunday nights race stock cars. We did Buddy Taylor and all of it. There was a ladies race there in August. The Corbin season ended in October, and Drisdale reported they paid out $8,700 that year to the drivers. 1949, there's Al Demery, his stock car at Corbin Speedway. Love that mud. 1950, Corbin opened in February, racing stock cars. There were 4 oncers competing. Bob just started racing too. Jerry Sr., Jerry Jr., Louie, and Bobby were all racing on here. Rio Grande opened May the 5th with the midgets. Tommy Drisdale began promoting both tracks under the Southwest Racing Association. He got a lease agreement, which unfortunately Rio Grande made him quit driving his midget to run both tracks. Tommy later moved to El Paso. Voila, we have track number 3, Speedway Park. It was south of Central, near the base, a 3/8 mile oval. The grandstands face north. At the beginning, it held 2,250 people. And you can see from this picture, here's Speedway Park, here's Carmen, and here's that 26 track. So they're all in this area. And I mentioned a Van Cleve Ranch, a track we built on earlier. It says to Harris Canyon, but this entire area is now the Van Cleve Mobile Home Park, so I don't know if there's any relation there or not.
And what drive-in movie theater is?
Oh, that was later. This is a 54, that was a terrace. They had the terrace, the first one in 51 and a twin in 53. And then later the Wyoming Theater was built down here.
Because Then the Terrace Drive-In was where Zuni was, and then the big.
Moon and Central was the terrace. Moon and Central is where the terrace drive-in was.
Huh, Moon Central.
Yeah,
That
but
was
see,
where Zuni made a
this-
big curve to be.
That would be further this way.
this is eventually Zuni here, I don't know. It's, yeah, there's a thing on the internet that shows that Wyoming was up here, but it wasn't, it was down here, and the sign was there. Again, this is a 54, so I'm not sure.
It doesn't seem like there's a lot of distance between Wyoming and Eubank.
No.
Racing?
There's a better close-up of Speedway, and most, I mean, my whole group in the back knows what Speedway Park looked like, but, oops, that's the right button. There's the grandstands. The parking is out here. A lot of open land.
Yeah.
It came about because the drivers here weren't happy with their treatment and their pay, so Mr. and Mrs. Walter Heiser of Indiana bought the land because their daughter was married to Al Denry, the driver. They initially bought the land, and the drivers built their own trailer. Here's a nice advertising sign. It's Central Eubank. It wasn't really a sign, but I guess somebody would like to have those old cars by now. This is the second weekend of racing at Speedway Park stock cars. And this is July of 50, and that looks like at least a 49 Ford, so that's a pretty late model car to be out there crashing around in. Here's some 50 action. Stock cars at Speedway Park. They raced under the New Mexico Motor Racing Association control, and Chick Malcolm was their first president who owned it, Malcolm Towing. Don Ackard was the very first race winner, and Dave Jones here was the 1950 stock car champion. Rio Grande Sports Bowl had called it quits about July. 3 tracks in a town of less than 100,000 people, there was no point. You'll see later that you could still see parts of the track when you went down I-40. That's where I-40 went. In 1951, Ray Craig was the only owner of Corbin, and they were back to racing midgets at Corbin. There was a new surface at Speedway Park. They had adobe and clay to hold the dirt down and give the drivers more traction. They were racing modified stock cars, they called them, and that was like 30 Model A coupes, no fenders or anything, and $1 per admission. In 52, Corbett chose an amusement park by it. It was Funland Amusement Park from 4600 block of Central had moved up there, and they called it Corbett Amusement Park and Speedway. This advertisement anyway. Speedway Park enlarged their grandstands and requested bids for concessions extra. Corbett raced midgets on Friday nights and Speedway raced stock cars on Sunday nights. Then the promoter, Jack Oreo, announced that Speedway was going to hold jalopy races on Saturday nights, which violated the agreement between the two tracks. So that caused some problems, and the drivers from one track were banned if they went to the other track. And the promoter, Al Forbes at Corbett, reported the PA wires were cut the next day. Corbett had the Joey Chitwood Auto Daredevil show in September, and the Southwest Midget Championship races that this was advertising with Buddy Taylor. 1953, Corbett did not open. Speedway Park was in jeopardy. The new state land commissioner, E.S. Walker, rescinded the sale to the Heisers He didn't like the appraisals, he didn't like certain details of the sale, so they finally managed to get him to lease the property to them until the state wanted it back, which was fortunately not until 1981. Corbett was reopened by two guys from Speedway, Doc Stanley and Lynn Mullen, and they renamed it Sandia Stadium. They raced stock cars on Saturday nights, and they tried something new. They paid each driver $5 for showing up. And along comes Frank Crosby, our famous promoter here in 1953. Frank had a background in vaudeville and doing shows for USO when he was in the service. He initially did publicity for Speedway Park for Wayne Miller, and they had weekly stunt shows there. Later, he moved over to Sandia Stadium, and he recruited GIs for this Condos Crosby Hill Drivers stunt show. He says none of them really got hurt out there, but one of their motorcycle guys got killed on the street when a car turned in front of him, so this was safer, I guess. There was actually a pitman hit by a race car and killed here at Sandia, so that's 3 deaths at this track. Wayne Miller and Bobby Youngster came over to race and then were immediately banned from Speedway Park. In 1954, Crosby and Jeff Baker, who would be eventually be the manager of the Civic Auditorium, took over the lease at Sandia Stadium. They arranged remote TV coverage for the races. They leased the concessions to George Buffett, and the photographer was Dick Scrondall, and the flagman was our future Senator Eddie Barboa, who was trained by Jerry Youngster Sr. himself. The New Mexico Motor Racing Association disbanded late in August, so Jack Corio was once again managing Speedway Park, the guy that caused all the trouble. I'm missing something here. Well, in 1955, Frank Crosby was asked by the Heisers to take over the lease of Speedway Park, which he did. And in the summer of '55, Sandia Stadium was torn down. He said it was actually condemned and torn down. There were ads for it to be leased clear up until like May, I think, in the paper. So racing continued in Albuquerque. That's the wrong date on there, but it's 1981, and we lost Speedway Park. We have racing pretty much continuous since then. Dirt track racing and some pavement racing for a while. We've got Sandia Speedway now, which is the only track out west. But there's a lot of years to go of racing here, so that's just up to 55. And lots to come. More answers to come. So, any questions? I didn't go out to Speedway Park until 1960 or 61, so all of this happened before my time. So it was really great finding all this information out and having this background, because I enjoyed the racing.
When did they stop racing at Speedway?
1981.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the state wanted the land back, and that was it.
Only at
And
some.
what is it now? What is it now, more or less? A mobile home park or something?
Oh,
Speedway Park is
no, it's
Sandia
a
Labs.
big developed thing up here.
Sandia.
Sandia Labs.
Industrial.
But we went through Duke City Raceway, lasted from '68 to 2003 down off of Broadway. We had Hollywood Hills out there, casino for several years. That was mismanaged, went out of business. So we've had the paved track for many years, but now they just have a dirt track out west of Sandia. Still hanging on, still getting dirt in our eyes.
You didn't have anything on Raceway Park?
What's that?
Raceway?
Yeah, Duke City Raceway.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that was
I only knew it was
built
raceway.
in '68, and they competed with Speedway much like the two tracks before here, and back and forth.
Where was that located, Duke City?
Duke City was south of Rio Bravo off of Broadway. Not sure, past Prosperity out there.
Just
The
before
owner-
you get to Bob Foster Road, and then
Yeah. mhm.
turn right off there.
The owner says, has in '68, and she lost her husband and her son, and it just got tired of, it's old. So it's a construction company or something out there, I guess now.
PG Enterprises.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Cool.
What about races on the state fairgrounds? There were a few of those, weren't there?
In the newer times, I only remember motorcycle races on the track we have now. I'm not sure if they raced cars on them at any time. They had monster shows in the Coliseum, but I don't think there was any car racing on them. That's my next 63 years of coverage of.
Hang in there.
Thank you.